Mormon Mental Health Podcast is a production of the Open Stories Foundation and relies on donations from its listeners like you. To help keep this podcast alive, please consider becoming a monthly subscriber. Any amount will make a difference. You can click the right-hand donate button on mormonmentalhealth.org. All contributions are tax-deductible within the United States and go towards podcast production and building community support and program development for Mormons on various paths and journeys. Thank you for listening. Hello and welcome to Mormon Mental Health. This is Natasha, Helper Parker. I am really glad to be back after what it feels like a bit of a hiatus from the podcast. July is always a crazy month for me with presenting at Sunstone and traveling to Utah. So anyway, here I am, and I'm kind of here last minute because of the news about the announcement from the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints today that said that they have come up with a mandatory training for those working with youth and adolescents, and I have not had a chance to look at it. They're not making it horribly easy to look at. I don't think you need to have the login and your member ID number and all of that kind of stuff, and I haven't even had a chance to look at all of that or try to figure that out. But I noticed that Jennifer Limones, who was on a Facebook group I'm a part of, had overviewed the program, and she would like to share some of her insights about it. I would like to invite some of her insights, so I'm going to bring her on the show. Before we get started, though, just please remember that Mormon Mental Health Podcast is a podcast that relies on listener support. I cannot continue to provide this podcast without financial support from donors. So if this is a podcast that you listen to and find valuable, get a lot of really positive feedback, and I'd love to see that value be translated into financial support so that we can continue to give you great content. And I'm looking at bringing on several different hosts, and I would love to pay them for some of their time. I can't do any of those things, plus pay the person who edits our content and website stuff and all that without your support. So for those of you who already do support the podcast, thank you so much. It's pretty easy to do that. Right on the website, there's like a little donor box. So whether you do that kind of as a subscription or a one-time donation, anything helps. Even little tiny bits really add up. So thanks in advance. Jennifer, welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks.
Hi. So right off the bat, let me just ask you to introduce yourself.
Yeah, my name is Jennifer Limones. I grew up a member of the church, was born into the covenant, and grew up a member of the church here in the Portland, Oregon area. And I am myself a survivor of childhood sex abuse within the church. And the activism that Sam has done, it just really strikes close to home for me. And I'm so grateful for what he's done. So I've been following really closely with everything that Protect LDS Children has been doing. And now they're merged into Protect Every Child, which is great. And I've been watching closely with the changes that the church has been making in correlation to the activism that he has been doing. So I find it interesting, kind of the coincidental timing on things.
Meaning that I'm guessing you think that activism works, that the church does have to kind of react to members who make a stink, I guess, about things that are important and that kind of get support from a lot of people.
I do. I think that I think that a lot of it is just awareness. As members of the church, my husband and I weren't really aware of what was going on outside our bubble with in regards to awareness with this type of thing. And so once the word kind of gets out and people talk about these things and just opening discussion up for families, for parents, I think it's been great. Yeah. And you were at the march last year, correct? I was, yeah. My friend and I last minute decided to fly out for the march, and that was an awesome experience.
That's wonderful. That's really wonderful. Okay, so you got on the website.
I did.
Okay, so you have already gone through the training that the church has prepared for its people who are working with youth and children, like minors in the church. Is that correct?
Yeah. I saw that they had put into effect training this morning when I got up, and I was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe this, because it's something that I've been talking with my parents about quite a bit. My dad is currently serving as a bishop of a young single adults ward, so it's not like he's working with children, but nonetheless, we've had this discussion about ways that things could be safer within the church. And my mom and I have been talking a lot about Stewards of Children. They offer a program. It's like a third party professionals that offer programs to churches within. I mean, it's great for anybody, because even within my career in the healthcare field, it's great to have that training for anybody that's around children.
What is your career in the health field? What do you
I
do?
work as a surgical tech in interventional radiology.
Okay.
So,
okay.
And I've worked in family practice as well. So not a lot of interaction with children now, but I have my two young boys. I've got an 11-year-old and a 7-year-old. And so I just think it's great for parents to have that information no matter what.
Yeah. Okay. So this is the training that you're referring to now is a separate training that the state of Utah has incorporated for what? Explain. I'm not from Utah myself, so how is it being incorporated?
Yeah, no, it's actually, I don't think it's based out of Utah. I think I can't remember what state. I think like North Carolina, but it's, US wide. There's trainings in each state. So like I looked up on their website and found it's called Darkness to Light training. I was able to find opportunities for local training where you can do in person here in Portland. And I'm sure they have that in every state. And then you can also do the training online.
Okay.
So I was, we had the conversation, my mom and I, about how awesome it would be if the church could get on board with doing that online training. And even right now, there's like a free code. So it would be free for the members of the church and the leadership to do this training. And it's, they include a lot of facts and statistics. So it's not emotionally charged training, or
you've been through that training. You've actually done it yourself.
Yeah. So I did the 2-hour training, and it was awesome.
It was 2 hours. The church's training is half an hour.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay.
It offers a lot of facts and statistics about, the percentage of likelihood that your child could be sexually abused within an organization. And a lot of them, unfortunately, are churches. So talks heavily about that. The difference I noticed between that and when I did the church's training this morning was that the church's training seemed to be, it was very emotionally charged. So it was a lot of like scriptural. They did include the Matthew scripture about the millstone around the neck. And of course, that hits home for me, and I think that's great. But they didn't include any sort of statistics or even discuss that there is a problem. So there was no admission that there's even an issue. And I think just that would be amazing if they could at least just, admit that there is a problem. That's why they're implementing the training, and talk about what the problem has been, so that people can become better informed and more aware of what's going on.
That's really interesting. And just to bear with me on a tangent here, just from a professional health kind of standpoint, I'm not a big fan of the millstone around the neck type of scripture anyway, because although we do want to hold perpetrators accountable, and we want to make sure that we, create systems where abuse is much lowered, I don't know that we necessarily want to promote suicide or violence towards perpetrators. We want to hold them legally and criminally accountable. Oftentimes, what we also don't realize is that people who take these trainings are perpetrators themselves, because they are currently serving with our youth and children. Yeah. So it's just a very complex matter, right? Where you're trying to primarily take care of victims, but secondarily also understand that perpetrators are needing, services, accountability, legal types of actions, and, millstones around the neck, I'm not sure are really helpful for anybody involved in the whole system.
Yeah, that goes back to treating it as a sin versus as a crime. And where we've gotten ourselves into a lot of trouble in the church.
Right. Okay. When I read the news release, they had a lot of information packed in there, like they were going to cover this and that. And I don't have it in front of me, so I can't read it, but it just seemed like they were having a very aggressive agenda for what I thought would be able to fit into half an hour. So how comprehensive of a training do you think you really received this morning?
It wasn't good. It was like 25 minutes. It has you click once you're done with each segment. So the segment could be like a minute or even a minute and a half. And then you click the next page. So I got through it in like 25 minutes, I think it was. A couple minutes of that had nothing to do with helping protect children. It was a story shared about animals, predatory animals, narrated by Elder Packer, which I thought was not helpful at all.
What did that have to do with the context?
I'm assuming just because it's linking into predators within the church, but it didn't really correspond with anything that was within the material.
Okay. Was there anything that you felt was useful, or any kind of direction or guidelines that, I mean, I'm guessing tons of people are going to be needing to take this course.
Yeah, I actually did. I liked the fact that they reinforced the two deep rule. They talked about what to do if you have one child in your class, and the fact that you need to merge your class with another classroom, with another adult and other children, so that there's never a one-on-one situation. But they weren't referring to bishops and children. They were referring to teachers. Yeah. So they did reinforce that. And, you know, when my husband and I were teaching a youth just 2 years ago, I can't tell you how many instances there were of classrooms where the second teacher wasn't available and we were alone teaching a class. There wasn't a second teacher. And so I think them reinforcing the need for that was a positive.
Okay, so that's one guideline that was helpful and positive. Anything else as far as what to do or who to call, or what to, you know, if you come across a situation where a kid, you know, either divulges information or you're aware of a situation, anything of that nature?
Yeah, it seems like I'm assuming that this training was created in part for the new scouting, I guess, whatever's replacing Boy Scouts of America. The church is coming up with their own scouting program. And so I think because of the segment, it's all like cartoon animated, this training is. And they had a couple segments on camping with leaders and making sure that there is never one leader in a tent with multiple children. So I'm assuming that that's going to be something that they discuss with this new scouting program.
Okay. So again, the not having one adult with either multiple children or one child, of course, in particular.
Yeah, it looked like they're going, from what I can tell, it was a parent, and it's animated, so it's kind of leaves you to, it's not very straightforward. So it leaves you to assume that they're going to have one parent with their own child on campouts now, is kind of what I gathered from the training. It has a little animated segment where a dad is alone with his kid, and then another child was going to join in that tent, and they basically said that they would need one adult per child. So I can't, it wasn't super straightforward in my mind about what their new policies are going to be. But I am assuming that they'll probably have more to come. I didn't click on all of the links. So there was like links under each segment that you can read from the handbook. And so I don't know if they've made some changes to the handbook, but those links.
It was the bishop's handbook, or?
Yeah, the handbook number 2.
Okay. So the stuff that's already been available.
Yeah, unless they're making changes to that too, which I'm not sure.
Okay. And so you mentioned this other training that you've also taken had a lot more statistics and kind of more of a maybe forward approach as far as disinformation versus making it spiritual and emotional. Any other differences that you would have noticed between the two?
That was the biggest difference for me, is that it was all, this entire training was from a spiritual, religious-based lens, as opposed to safety and statistics and what's legal and what's not legal versus spiritual well-being of children. So That's the main takeaway from me, the difference between the two. And just the time, how much shorter the training was, and how much more vague it was as well.
Yeah, and this is something that the church itself is saying will be required every 3 years. So half an hour every 3 years on sexual abuse training doesn't equate to me as something that's being taken horrifically seriously, just as far as the type. I mean, I get that it's hard to get people to take any trainings, especially people who are in volunteer situations. Yeah. And yet, so I mean, they probably want to make it as short and succinct as possible. And yet half an hour every 3 years just doesn't seem like the type of robust, comprehensive type of training we might want to be providing parents and teachers and leaders and bishops and young men's and young women's presidencies, et cetera.
Yeah, I don't know that they have realized that it needs to be as high of a priority as I think it does. It's not a half an hour every 3 years because it's as big of a problem as it is. They need to put some more weight into that.
Right. Well, and they did say that the course was developed with the input of mental health professionals. Of course, they didn't say which mental health professionals. I don't know if these are people who work for LDS Family Services or kind of people who are inside the bubble of Mormonism, whereas I would prefer to be, very trauma-informed specialists that are nation renowned. And we should be able to afford to get, comprehensive and kind of expertise from the best in the nation, right? Or even the best in the world as far as this kind of things go. We're an international church and we have lots of resources. So it was disappointing to not really get a sense of where and who they got input from, and kind of create some issues for me as far as an internal system when we know that the church already has a lot of problems kind of being self-protective versus having a third party that's going to hold us accountable and kind of, make sure that we're following best care standards of practice, that we're following trauma-informed care regulations, things of that nature.
Yeah, I agree. And going back to the Stewards of Children program, they have available, it's a third party program. And the one that was in Portland was actually being hosted at a Baptist church in the area. And I know that a lot of churches have used that program, which I appreciate them using a third party, because then it takes away that unethical possibility of it being unethical run internally, which that's part of what we've seen. That's, like you said, it's what's gotten us into this problem in the first place, is having these internal processes that don't allow in the law enforcement, and basically, even maybe with good intentions, it's covered things up.
Right. Like we have issues with transparency. We have, many of the stories that you and I, for example, heard from people at the march are stories where people went and tried to get help from leaders, and either they weren't believed, or they were kind of minimized, or they were blamed. Like that kind of happened, especially when we have such a history of, again, I don't think necessarily maliciously, but of course, a high priest leader couldn't do that, right? So we hold people up on pedestals and have no capability of really holding perpetrators who are high in stature and charisma and standing responsible for some of these things that their children or other children or minors might come forth and report. I know many people have been told things like, oh, you're probably just seeking attention, or what's going on, or even if there were issues, the stake or bishop leadership tends to want to protect the family and puts the perpetrator through a process of repentance, thinking that that's going to solve the problem, when that's not the clinical treatment and the accountability that perpetrators need or benefit from. And then they're, putting more people at risk.
Yeah, I agree 100%. I think that for decades, we've seen them try to help people, but not having the tools that they know that they're able to actually help people. And so it's just this cycle of trying to rehabilitate offenders without having any professionals involved and releasing them back into the community and having them offend again. And it's tragic.
Right. What do you think about the interesting dichotomy between having this training saying, nobody should have a one-on-one interview with a child, or not a one-on-one interview, a one-on-one, setting with a child, And yet we do nothing to change the worthiness interview process, which is something that I know the Protect Every Child movement has been so, staunch on. And on top of it, asking, explicitly sexual questions and things that we know from a mental health community that are harmful to children and teens. So how do you handle that dichotomy? Like, I just listened to this training that says no one-on-one teachers and meetings, and yet we have this huge tradition that allows for it to happen on a weekly basis, and where most of the stories come from, as far as, there are stories about primary teachers, but there's many, many more stories about inappropriate, interactions with leaders in these one-on-one worthiness interviews.
Yeah, I think it goes back to the fact that even though some might not want to admit it, we are holding our bishops on a pedestal and believing that they are more inspired than the rest of us lay leadership have been. And so when you're saying it's not okay to have a teacher one-on-one, but it is okay to have a bishop one-on-one with a child, why is there a difference, And the other thing that I was really hopeful for with this new training is the fact that they would be implementing background checks, which I was disappointed that wasn't part of the new safety training. I think that's huge.
Yeah, I would agree. Okay, so anything else that you would give feedback about it? I know I caught you like super quick. I wanted like a super quick review from somebody who had delved into it today.
No, nothing is coming to mind. I wish that they would have had it, I don't know, just a more real approach on things. Like I said, instead of using it emotionally charged and spiritually charged language and even animated clips, I wish it could have been, I don't know, just presented in a way that was more facts, more statistics.
Like an actual training, like
like
an professional training.
Exactly. Where children are most likely to be abused. We know that from, our past history with it. And why aren't we talking about that? I don't understand why we're just skimming over all of the facts and statistics on it.
Yeah. So again, with many of these things, those of us who are clamoring for change, we are grateful and, want to support positive change. This is obviously a step in the positive direction that a training would exist at all. At the same time, it's difficult to celebrate change when, first of all, it's been so late a coming, right? So, these are things that really our nation and many other churches have been offering and doing and taking much more seriously for decades ahead of us. So that's frustrating to then celebrate something. And then when we have to celebrate something that's subpar compared to what other organizations and churches are making available to their people. So it's definitely a double-edged sword. We want to support positive change, and especially I know those within the church that are probably really trying very hard to make these kinds of changes happen. In the bureaucracy, we know that sometimes that can be slow going, and yet it's kind of left with a bit of a sad cloud overhead.
It is. Yeah, it was disappointing overall, but like you said, I'm glad that you can see the correlation between what Sam's doing and something happening. There's something going on that's triggering them to implement this. And so I think we'll just keep pushing for more and better systems of training for people. So
yes, more accountable trainings. More third-party trainings.
Yeah, and I do have the link to a free code for doing the Stewards of Children training online, the 2-hour training program. So I'll put that in the link. I'll put that in the links of this video for you, for anybody that wants to look into that training.
Yeah, that would be great. If you could just share it right there on the Facebook thread, that would be
And perfect. The other thing I wanted to mention is that you can log on and watch this training without having a member number. I don't have my member number any longer. I did resign my membership back in September. But you can log on with your old LDS.org account. You just need an account. You don't need a member number.
Okay.
So it will pop up this that says enter your member number. But if you scroll down, you can click on a link that says watch the training without it being recorded. So they're tracking who's doing the training based on member number, but you can watch the training without being a member.
Okay, that's good to know. And hopefully they'll just put a link to it, in on their general page as well. But I understand needing the member number if they're going to track who's watching it and who's in a calling and things of that nature, for sure. Mm. Okay, wonderful. Well, I can't thank you enough for taking me up on a last minute podcast here. Jennifer, where are you again? In Portland, Oregon?
Portland, Oregon, yeah.
All right. Well, good luck to you. Thank you so much for sharing your insights. I'll definitely be interested in hearing other people's perspectives. Again, if you're a fan and supporter of Mormon Mental Health, please send us a few bucks our way to help support the financial stability of the podcast. And I hope everybody has a great weekend. Thanks, Jennifer.
Thank you.
All right. Goodbye.
Bye.
Thanks for joining us today on Mormon Mental Health Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please help us and become a monthly subscriber at mormonmentalhealth.org. The goals of this podcast include education, advocacy, and the mental health and general well-being of Mormons and their families. We can't further this work without your support. Music for this episode was provided by the Lower Lights.
Over life's tempestuous sea, chart and compass came from thee. Jesus, Savior, pilot me, unknown way before me roll, hiding rock and treacherous shoal, chart and compass came from thee. Jesus, Savior, pilot me. Jesus, Savior, pilot me. Boisterous wave, obey thy will, when thou sayest to them, be still. Wondrous sovereign of the sea, Jesus, Savior, pilot me. When at last I near the shore, and the fearful breakers roar, may I hear thee say to me, fear not, I will pilot thee. Twixt me and the peaceful rest, then while